DOTE.
Welcome to the more advanced tutorial for how to use export to RTF. So it's to export your transcript, and here we see a transcript, a Mondadian transcript, which is a little bit more complicated. And how do we get this into a publishable form? And of course, as we saw in the basic tutorial, you can just copy paste, but you'll lose a lot of the underlining, and the formatting will not be so tweakable. So what we're going to see is how more advanced features for tweaking your export to RTF so you can import in a word processor. So if we go to export to RTF again, and here we see we're going to use the Mondadian transcript this time, not the Jeffersonian one, because it's a bit more complicated. And we'll see that we can get a nice export. So most of these functions are the same. The styling is particular to the Mondadian style, slightly different from the Jeffersonian. So we're going to see how it works for that, and I'll take a look at what it looks like in a Word document, and then tips for using Word to be able to format it. So let's go through all of these options quickly. Here you see the basic transcript all laid out, and it's using syntax highlighting. But notice these first two up here: export only selected lines in transcript. Now that might be you just don't want to export the whole thing, so let's go back and let's just choose some lines. So if I just select here and I say I only want these lines here and those to be line numbered, and these numbers that you see here in the column here are nothing to do with line numbering. They're simply for the editor to be able to refer to lines of your transcript. This won't be reflected, these numbers, in your export. So you can choose that, say export, and now you'll see we have the whole thing, but if we say only selected lines, we'll see it matches to the lines that we selected. So now we can export those with line numbers specifically for those lines starting at 1. So now we have a transcript ready for publication with line numbers at 1. Of course, if you wish to have this numbered as in relation to the whole, then the best thing to do is export the whole thing and then extract in your Word document or word processor the lines, and it will keep those lines as they're hard-coded into the document. So then you can pull those out with the line numbering that matches the whole transcript. If you want it to be line numbered from 1 every time, then this is the way to do that. So let's go back and say, no, we don't want to do that. We want the whole thing. You can have a fast preview. As you notice, this is over 100 lines. It might be that the transcript is 1,000 lines. So you might want to limit the preview. So if we say limit to 50 lines, it's actually going to be much faster. See, it's only up to 50 lines. Because what it has to do is parse the whole transcript every single time you make a change, and so the preview window might not update so quickly. So let's keep it at that. So that would be really fast, limit preview to 50 lines. We've got syntax highlighting. We could turn that on and off. Just a simple thing. Technical comments. If I do that, then you'll see we have these technical comments, and we could put the highlighting back. And those are technical comments which either are in the main body of the metadata at the top, or there are meta comments all the way through that could be just everything after a double slash, as you see here. Double slash will be ignored as part of the transcript, and you can omit it. So you can add comments and then omit them when you export. So here we can see we could keep that data, and that data is telling us this information, which is of course already, if you know about subtiers and you've seen that video tutorial, this is already encoded in the transcript options. Here's the options up here. But we just put it here for reference for those who, when we export, don't have access to DOTE. So let's just take that off. We don't want the technical comments. And then line numbering, we say all. We could say none, so we don't have any line numbering. We could put only primary lines, and then we could have only first instance. First instance would be if R1 or a person continues continually, then the numbering will. It generally works better in Jeffersonian than in Mondadian, because it's best to number. I think we've enforced here numbering on consecutive neighborhoods when there's a lot of subtiers. But in Jeffersonian, when you have a speaker continuing over multiple lines, then only primary lines will show a line number for the speaker on every line that they're speaking if there's no other speaker. So let's keep it as this one, and number the comment only lines. That means not generally it's going to always be done here, but in a Jeffersonian, then that would be if you have a comment only line, which I don't think we're not going to have any comments in this, but if you used a double bracket with a comment on its own line, then it would number or not number that. Convert tabs to spaces. If we say that, what we see here is we need a problem immediately. We need to expand this because that's why things were not displaying correctly. We need to have a larger tab size, because if we don't, then what's going to happen is things are not going to be able to fit in. So now we've got things, and I was alerted to that when I was saying convert tabs to spaces. We shouldn't see any change in the preview. It's simply in the export, are we going to have a tab here, or are we going to replace those tabs with spaces? If you do that, when you export and open it in Word, that distance is actually hard-coded and it cannot be changed very easily. But if it's a tab, then all you have to do is adjust the tab mark for the whole document, and then that will move every single line, so you can adjust it later in your word processor. And sometimes publishers require that you have no tabs here. You just want spaces because of the way they lay out their publications, and so you can do that just by saying I don't want to have any tabs at all in my export. So now we've got things laid out correctly. We've got the font size. We could go a little larger and we're still okay. Yeah, we're not having any wrap over onto the next line. So this would be a nice font size maybe to export as. And then as we have so many subtier types here, both translation and action subtier types, we don't have any figure subtier types, but these are quite dense, then it's looking a little bit ugly, but this is necessary in DOTE so that we can better understand the transcript and give better help. But when you export, you might want to get rid of that, so we can export with the tier names that are appropriate for speakers and participants. So if I select that, now we have eliminated the colon, and we have uppercase for the speaker in a neighborhood, and all the subtiers are in lowercase for the same name for the participant or speaker. So it still needs a little extra step. If we do that, now you get the highlighting appropriate with the line numbering, with bold and then italic for the translation, and then a lighter font also for the subtiers. And now we've pretty much matched to the Mondadian style, version 5.0.1. So there's a lot of choices here. If we send it all the way back to all and keep syntax highlighting and back to here, you could export it as this, and if you have DOTE Free and not DOTE Pro, then you will not be able to have the extra formatting and style name changes. Those are premium features. So you can export this, and then you'll have to hand edit it yourself if you wish to change these. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at what it looks like. There we are. And I'll just cancel this one so we can see the transcript here. And so what I've done is I exported this one, not just these lines here, but the whole thing. And this is what it looked like with the basic settings with no formatting. And you can see that's pretty much matches the preview, and it's very much related to what you see here. It's got the right spacing here for the tabs so that things line up nicely. So that's the basic formatting you can export, and it also had syntax highlighting, so for overlaps as well down here, pausing, and for speaker or participant identification with the subtier type. Now what does it look like when we wish to look at some formatting? Now when we format, this is what we get exported, and I've just opened it in Word. I haven't done any changes. And here we see the line numbering now, and the formatting and style and now matches the expected Mondadian's conventions. So that shows how it's possible to take a densely structured transcript with many subtiers using our proposed system of subtier name subtier types and category types and translation and gloss types. You could have a gloss here and a figure as well as all of these. then that means that once you give that information, then it's really easy for us, for DOTE to parse your transcript and figure out any errors, and then export it so it looks like this, which is actually highly parsimonious. It's a lot of information has been removed, and it makes it very susceptible to errors. But now it's in the style that's expected. So some last little tips for using the word processor. And here I'm using Word, Office, Microsoft Office Word, or whatever word processor. You'll have to figure out certain things. So there are problems sometimes with a transcript when you open it. Will have all sorts of symbols in it about syntax, grammar parsing, as well as spelling. So what I'll do is just open an earlier one, this one here, sorry, this one, which is a Jeffersonian transcript that's been exported, and Word has decided to try and spell check as well as parse and say that there's grammar errors. Now there's a way to turn that off, and if you go to File, Options, you'll see that under Proofing, if you go down to the bottom of Proofing, this is not obvious at all. Hide spelling errors in this document only, and hide grammar errors in this document only. And if we say OK, it all disappears. So in Word, it's possible to eliminate all the mess that's created, given that this is not a prose text. The other thing you can do is, this is in Courier New. We export in Courier New. Courier New is maybe not the most pretty format, font. What you can do is just select everything, and in Word there is a font called Console Us, which you might is slightly better. It's a little more rounded, and this could be chosen as your font. You may need to adjust the size, so if we select it all again, it may be too large or too small, so you can reduce it down to a different size, or go too large and you'll see what happens. It then wraps over, which is not good at all. So let's just go back to a 10 and we'll see everything looks nice. Yeah, there's a slight rollover you can see here, so it's always good to check. Obviously another way to solve that is to go to Layout, look at your margins, and say narrow margins, and now we don't have that problem. But that might not be suitable for publication, of course. It might be a little bit too wide now. So changing the margins, changing the font size, changing the font itself, as well as dealing with spelling checking and grammar checking and turning that off. Those are just some tips for getting things into order. Now what you notice is that if I turn on show hidden characters, we'll see that we have here the tab marks. But if we had selected in the export to, let me just go back and see that, and if I say export to RTF, if we'd said convert tabs to spaces here, what we would have found is that we would have only spaces. All the tabs would have been converted and everything would have lined up. But unfortunately, if you do that, it's no longer possible to change this. So if you change the size and you want to actually say bring this in a little bit more, you won't be able to do that manually very quickly at all. You'll have to hand edit every single space. But if you leave the tab, then you can quickly adjust the tab marking in your word processor and move it in. But Word DOTE does that for you pre-export, so you can select it here and change your tab size if you need to. For example, I could just show that. Let's say we want some formatting. Everything's nicely formatted. That's quite a big gap there. What we could do is take down the tab size, and you'll see as we move down there, then it's working nicely. There's some basics for how we can export to RTF, ready for publication. And in future versions we'll be adding more and more features about exporting to PDF or image, and tweaking the number of options that are available. That's all for now.